Full Swing, a story about the Emerald Circus from Paper Mario Color Splash. The lush green ground shook, as if it were bouncing up and down in anticipation, in harmony with the swaying blades of sharp, emerald grass. The spinning leaves which descended from hundreds of thick, full trees, grand in size, and the staggered beats of hundreds of excited feet, forming a massive line which veered and turned through the dense forest. The repeated stomping of soul after soul had produced a visible trail through the overgrown terrain, which led to even more feet trudging into the seemingly uneventful forest. The ants and ticks and other insects that would routinely gather in patrolling the forest grounds had all retreated to their colonies, and the plethora of exotic birds soaring through the understory seemed to shy away as well. The rumbling footsteps had unknowingly tucked away the wildlife in the forest, too intently focused on where their journey was taking them. Growing eagerly every second, excitement flooded the forest like rainwater, dousing the winding line of bodies packed so tightly together their arms refused to extend, and dripping down onto shoes of varying complexities, hues, and fabrics. The impatient tapping of feet and swaying of bodies made the forest an almost unbearable place. The line stretched from its last occupant, a sad soul sitting cross-legged on a simple gravel road just outside the forest boundaries, to the first in line, an ecstatic boy who stood almost a mile into the forest, his childish face illuminated by magnificent bright yellow strings of lights which were sturdily strung high, across a cleared plot of land, surrounded by trees on every side. A huge circular structure stood over the young boy and his family, as well as the others who were lucky enough to be at the line's source. Red and yellow stripes, so bright they were almost obnoxious, were somewhat unevenly painted over the stretchy surface of the building, which was also coated with an even more ridiculous amount of posters, the bottoms of which were all slightly curled. The posters had a flashy gold film on their borders, inside of which was a picture of a green, shiny star and some words. "Welcome to the Emerald Circus." The text somehow managed to be even more garish than the obtrusively distracting film around it. The whole place was so bright and gaudy that only a child could actually enjoy it. In fact, there seemed to be more children filling up the line than adults, and the adults that were in the line happened to be with a child, and didn't look very pleased to have been dragged there by their kids. The adults' irritated eyes were blinded by what was possibly the worst feature of the area. Atop the red and yellow big top was a massive luminescent sign that flashed on and off in ridiculous patterns. A wooden fence with gaps between the planks sectioned off a corner of land beside the circus, and the tall metal poles of multiple cages protruded from within the gated area, just barely in sight. The poles were dented due to immense force. After what seemed to be hours of waiting for the children, and even longer for the adults, two blue curtains which proudly stood side by side at the big top center began to open extremely slowly, as if to further build up the already overwhelming sensation of excitement flowing through the hundreds of jubilant children in line. From within the curtains, which cracked open just enough for a small round man dressed in red to hobble out, came whirling beams of light, some red, some blue, some flashing, others static. The curtains quickly retreated back to their secreting position, as the short, crimson-cloaked figure assumed a relaxed position, behind a pretty unsturdy wooden stand, from which he revealed a high stack of yellow tickets. "Come one, come all!" the man yelled with much flair, holding his bejeweled top hat in the air as if to raise the line's spirits high into the night sky. His chubby cheeks blazed with a passionate pink highlight, and his eyes squinted with glee. "Mommy, Daddy, let's go! What's taking so long? They're starting to let people in, honey, just wait. How come they get to go in first?" Juvenile screams echoed through the forest as word spread to the far end of the line that the circus had begun admitting guests. The line began to compress rapidly, as not only did more and more people disappear into the circus tent, but those outside crammed even closer together in hopes of potentially cutting off a bit of the line in the chaos. Eventually, the curtains closed. A small barrier was placed in front of them, and a wooden sign was hammered into the ground, which conveyed that the show was sold out. After dismissing the seemingly never-ending line of despondent youths, the ticket seller's rosy cheeks had lost most of their intensity, and his massive, welcoming smile seemed to be using an immense amount of energy and still struggled to persist. His grin failing, his face exhausted and coated in sweat, and even his hat failing to maintain its brilliance, the stout man nudged off his stool and crouched under the velvet barrier with a funny struggle. The circus's interior was terrifically extravagant. An overabundant amount of lights made certain that not 1 inch of the big top would be left in the dark. So many triangular banners were strung over the elevated stage that it was amazing they didn't get tangled. The stage took up nearly the whole circus, and above it lurked suspended trapezes, rings, and even a small trampoline held up by strings, which was in the very center of it all. 2 sets of stairs on either side of the stage were the dullest attributes in sight, as, in contrast to all the vibrantly colored features in the tent, they were simply a dull, boring gray. The inappropriate stairs led up to 2 separate, multi-layered arrangements of seats, each and every one occupied by a guest, some restless with joy, others half asleep. After the curtains closed and restricted the rest of the visitors from getting in, the plump ticket seller was the last into the big top. Rather than taking a seat, he stood at the back of the circus, just by the entrance, on his stubby legs. This way, his range of sight allowed him to look over just about the whole circus. His parched eyes looked through the endless rows of cheery kids and their wary guardians. He continued his surveying until the big top suddenly went dark. What must have been hundreds of lights on the ceiling all turned black in an instant. The darkness hushed the curious crowd almost instantly, but it didn't take long for soft murmurs to begin flowing again, as expectations and thoughts stirred up. "When's it gonna start? I want to see Lemmy!" "Shh, be quiet, sweetheart, it'll start soon. I'm so excited for the animals." With a sputter of greatness, the lights relit the tent and restored its resplendence. Everything in the building was just as it had been, aside from one irregularity. Perfectly centered on the stage was a glittering striped circus ball, which was about as tall as the ticket seller's tiny body. The sound of chains swinging from above brought every guest's attention to the big top ceiling. Every eye in the vicinity gravitated towards a yellow blur which swiftly flipped from one trapeze to another with unrivaled grace. The shimmering body continued showing off its aerobics for an irrational period of time. The tacky display quickly wore off on the adults, but the children only became more entertained the longer their eyes remained peeled on the acrobat. The airborne dancer flipped and leapt and hung at least twice from every contraption in the circus, before making a splendiferous landing with one glistening shoe of silver leather planted atop the striped ball, balanced with utter perfection. One leg stood upon the ball for balance, while the other flung straight outward, protruding from the body. Both of the slender legs were clad in silky, golden pants that could instinctively draw in attention with flair. A clean white belt served to alleviate the aggressive tone of the flashy pants below it. However, it was too small an accessory to distract from the sequin-covered suit that rested on slim shoulders. The suit was an even richer gold than the pants, and was a tad big on the skinny torso. One jeweled button kept the suit fancily folded over its wearer's stomach. However, no shirt rested underneath. Instead, a bare chest revealed itself. One sleeve extended out from its host, as if pointing to the audience, while the other was raised high in the air, and at the end of it, a smooth hand gripped a glaring red ring that seemingly fabricated out of thin air. The ringmaster slowly lowered his skyward leg to rest on the ball, in harmony with its counterpart. With both feet steadily placed atop the immobile sphere, he placed the hand without the ring upon his hip, and used his other to spin the ring faster and faster above his head. As the ring's velocity increased, it became a whirring blur of scarlet sparkles that captivated even the adults. Before it launched off his fingertip with uncontrollable force, in one swift rotation of his wrist, the ringmaster had secured the ring and brought it to an immediate halt. He lifted his free hand to adjust a clip-on bow tie, which was likely just an act to draw attention to the extra accessory, as it was already in a perfect position. He then raised his hand even higher, in order to slightly part his multi-tipped mohawk, with its pink, blue, and yellow highlights, slightly to the right. The hand ended its journey extended straight out, giving the audience a peace sign as a slim, childish face gave a brash smile, one slightly uncentered gold tooth sticking out like a sore thumb amongst the white rows of teeth. The audience roared with youthful voices. "Look at him, Mom! Look at him! I love you, Lemmy! What do you think he's gonna do first?" If you've been enjoying the story so far, you can check out the full thing in the link below in the description. And also, I don't do full voiceovers just because, one, I don't really like my reading, and two, I know I don't like listening to audiobooks. I'm sure some people do, but I just prefer reading it myself. So please let me know, to anyone watching this up to this point anyways, if you like the story, let me know if you want me to do full voiceovers, or if you would rather me just like cut it halfway through, give you a good chunk of the story, and then you can read the rest if you'd like, because I'm not exactly sure what to do. Anyways, if you like this story, also at the end of the video there will be a playlist to all my other stories. I have one on Splatoon 2, one on Skyward Sword, and a few others, and I'll definitely be making more as the times go by. Thank you all for watching, and as always, have a great day, everyone.